We're here in a students panel. We have 5 students from Liberty University. Actually, there were more students involved in the project that we collaborated on with 2 Israeli students, Shlomi Friedman and Yotam Lechovsky, who is now late. He should come here. He has some traffic jams, I suppose. And the students have helped us to establish the database for information on genocides in the 20th and 21st century. We have included about 10 cases, and they are going to talk about the cases that they have researched. We have a very interesting section in the website of the Research Center, which has their inputs, their summaries of the cases, and each of them is going to talk about a specific case. Now, I know that you have sent me your bios, and it appears on the very dignified, I hope, booklet that we have made for the conference. You cannot see them, unfortunately. I can send you the PDF of the booklet. But we want to have time to go into your CV. So just everyone, it would be more informal and more and nicer. Please present yourself and say just a couple of sentences, or what do you study, in which year are you, and then present your presentation. Remember to stick to 10 minutes, please. And then we would have, a short informal discussion. We could ask you questions. You could ask each other questions, and also questions not only relating to your work, but also to, how it is to be a student in Liberty, how it is to be a student in Israel, and whatever you like to ask. Okay, so Dr. Caleb Fisher, do you want to say anything, or they could just go on? Yeah.
Only to say hello to our dear Liberty students. It's good to see you all here, and excited that you can be a part of this.
Okay. But Maya Gotzins should be here. She had some issues and she couldn't. So we would begin with Shlomi Friedman. Shlomi Friedman present yourself.
Okay. Okay, so my name is Shlomi Friedman. I'm from Ramat Gan, and I'm studying in Reichman. I'm graduated a bachelor degree in psychology and law from Reichman University. Today I'm an intern in the firm Herzog Fuchs Neiman and at the FinTech regulation department. And I have the privilege to research and write about the killing and the deportation, the killing of and deportation in Paraguay, and also try to answer the question if it's fall under the category of genocide. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Eli Mudrik Ben-Chen for the opportunity to research this interesting and challenging topic, and thank you. I want to start with a brief about the case. The Ash are South American native population of hunter-gatherers that lived in eastern Paraguay. Since the 15th century. They were referred as Gaki, but they prefer the label Ash, which was attached to them since the 1960s. In the end of the 1960s, in the military dictatorship of Alfredo Stanso, a policy of highly advanced and expansion of the area left the ash untouched in the corner of the forest. They live by the age-old tradition, sometimes attacking livestock and intellectual property. They become a problem to the new settlers of the area that saw them as a problem. And in the end of the 1960s, the practice of organized ash hunts has become a commonplace in the part of the settlement, who referred the ash as mountain rats. Afterward, the dictatorship began accompanying the forest settlement of the ash, the community of the ash, to expel them from the region and concentrate them in the national ash settlement under the military command and dependent by the Ministry of National Defense. Those who refused to transfer to the settlement was forcibly captured and organized by the military command, with many of them been killed, captured, and finally displaced. The result was verbal ethnic cleansing of new farming region, with the community transferred to the settlements. Once there was many forced to work as a virtual slave labor in the case of particularly on the farm. Many children were sold to the Paraguayan families, and most of them ended working as domestic servants, with no identity. The settlement was suffered a lack of food and medical and led them to death. According to the studies, documentation, the community population planned more than 50% less than 5 years. The fact was documented and reported by Dr. Minzal, German anthropologist who has moved to the region to study about the ash culture, who discovered the policy that first the settlement of concentration undertaken by the military command. The military campaigning against the ash were mainly ethnic cleansing, campaigning, but yet bordering on genocide. However, the big question if it falls under the category of genocide. In 1974, the International League of Human Rights, with the Inter-American Association for Democracy and Freedom, charged the government of Paraguay to complicity in a genocide against the ash. The organization alleged the government was responsible for enslaving, torture, and masquerading the ash, for denying them food, medical, and for removing them and selling the ash children. All of those are characteristic of genocide. In 1977, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights asked the Paraguayan state to investigate the suspicion of the crime committed against the ash and bring the responsible for justice. However, no criminal investigation was ever opened. In 1983, the UN Commission of Human Rights also opened a procedure to investigate the crime request that the UN Secretary General himself contacted Paraguay to put end the suspicious criminal practice. However, Paraguayan leadership showed no real desire to investigate this case and open a criminal procedure. Once the country became democracy, they didn't show real desire to procedure the crime of the previous dictatorship. In 2008, the Truth and Justice Commission of Paraguay completed the work, documented the crime committed during the dictatorship rules, established that they was responsible for the event. The commission report that the commission report was sent to the state attorney to ask them to start the procedure against the ash, but still not date as settled yet. In July 2014, the ash community brought the case through the Argentine court by virtue of principle of universal jurisdiction. I'm sorry, as the only way to achieve the necessary justice and the necessary truth for the ash. Whether or not genocide is occur is dependable of the meaning and the definition of genocide. If we go to Raphael Lemkin definition, we can, if we go to Raphael Lemkin definition for genocide, so genocide has occurred and happened in the ash, with the ash in Paraguay. But if we go to the current conviction of punishment and of prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide definition, it's debatable if it's go under the category of genocide because it's not the conviction doesn't include political group in their definition of genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. So it just takes us back to the panel that we had before, that we said that the definition of genocide is not inclusive enough, and we see another case that proves that. So we'll continue with Robert Swinskowski. I hope I articulated your name rightly. Swanchkovsky. Okay. From Liberty University. And please present yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's certainly, I'm blessed to have this opportunity. I'm Rob Swinkowski. I live in upstate New York. I retired in 2017 after 30 years of law enforcement, and I got a job teaching at a local university in undergraduate studies in criminal justice. Beginning of COVID, found some idle time and decided to attend Liberty University to get my PhD in criminal justice. I've had Dr. Fisher for a public policy elective, very interesting class, and love the biblical perspective on government. So today I'll be presenting on the pacification campaign of East Timor. I'm going to try sharing my screen here, and hopefully this will work. And hopefully everyone can see that. Outstanding. So I'm going to review just a brief history between East Timor and Indonesia, as well as the response internationally to Indonesia's actions against East Timor, the legal response from East Timor seeking accountability for the actions of Indonesia, the determination of this being a genocide or not, and just some brief aftermath of where East Timor is today. So East Timor, Timor-Leste, it's an island about 300 miles north of Australia. Population consisted primarily of farmers. They were a Portuguese colony. In 1975, just 1 year after East Timor was free from nearly 450 years of Portugal rule, Indonesia, which is about 200 times the size of East Timor, attempted to prevent that independence and began a systematic extermination of the East Timorese and their culture. By 1978, a full military assault from Indonesia resulted in the complete control of East Timor. The Indonesian government claimed that the Timorese were communists and that the pacification campaign was simply to stifle any progression of the communist agenda. In truth, East Timor was rich in natural resources, most notably oil, which the Indonesian government used to garner international support for their actions. The crimes against humanity that were committed by Indonesia in East Timor included the banning of free speech, the right to assemble, the right to worship, as well as the deprivation from media sources. The Timorese people were cut off from food supplies and incarcerated and were starved by the Indonesian government. Some Timorese were tortured, kidnapped, faced expulsion from the country, and the female population of all ages was victimized by sexual assaults. And they were forced to take drugs that were masked as vaccinations to prevent pregnancy. It's estimated altogether between 1975 and 1999, approximately 200,000 Timorese were killed in the genocide. This does include both in combat situations and regimented or unfettered murder of the Timorese people. Ultimately, nearly 80% of the homes, businesses, infrastructure representing the Timorese culture was destroyed. The international response, Australia, Britain, New Zealand, and the United States maintained interest with Indonesia as an economic partner concerning the acquisition of land for access to oil in East Timor. Evidence reveals that these nations were complicit in the East Timor genocide through political responses that diverted awareness of Indonesia's invasion and provided Indonesia with military aid. The Australian government publicly asserted a false narrative regarding the human rights violations and crimes against the Timorese to deflect blame and accountability from Indonesia. Australia and the United States also misrepresented Indonesia's actions in front of the United Nations, downplaying the military actions against East Timor and suggesting They're part of the suppression of communist activity. For over 20 years, the actions of Indonesia went unchallenged and unnoticed until the UN called for the withdrawal of Indonesia from East Timor. This fell on deaf ears, and Australia and United States' response to the UN's request was simply to vamp up the military resources to Indonesia. It was only when the Santa Cruz massacre in Dili occurred, this was November 12, 1991, almost 21 years ago to the day. This was captured on film by American journalists and released to the public. The evidence revealed Indonesia's oppression and brutal behavior towards the Timorese. This led to the Indonesian allies condoning the government's actions and thus reducing their support towards this pacification campaign. East Timor sought accountability. So following the genocide, there were calls for an international tribunal to bring justice to those responsible for the crimes against humanity during Indonesia's occupation. Specifically, East Timor was seeking prosecution of human rights violations following the rejection of a UN referendum regarding autonomy with Indonesia. The Geneva Convention bound Indonesia as the occupying power. This resulted in the United Nations Transnational Administration of East Timor, or the UNTAET, to begin prosecuting those responsible for the genocide. A hybrid court, the Special Panels for Serious Crimes in East Timor, was established in the District Court of Dili, where a panel of judges held exclusive jurisdiction over genocide, war crimes, torture, and crimes against humanity. The Commission for Reception, Truth, and Reconciliation was also founded under the UNAET to explore the extent of human rights violations in East Timor and assist in the reassimilation of the East Timorese. Under the UN Security Council resolutions, the UNTAET's work in prosecuting serious crimes ended in May of 2005. In total, 55 trials were conducted, 84 persons were convicted, and 3 were acquitted. East Timor did criticize the UNTAET as sidelining East Timor for resolving their conflict and allowing those primarily responsible for the crimes against the country and its people to avoid facing justice. In determining if this was in fact a genocide, while the UN High Commission for the Human Rights identified these atrocities as clear human rights violations, a breach of international humanitarian law, and crimes against humanity, they avoided classifying Indonesia's actions as a genocide. However, many human rights organizations, such as Amnesty International, acknowledged Indonesia's pacification campaign as a genocide. Ultimately, the UNTAET defined the serious crimes against Indonesia to include genocide. I would argue under the Preparatory Commission for the International Criminal Court that Indonesia's pacification campaign in East Timor was in fact genocide, as the following elements, as the commission established, existed. Specified conduct committed against one or more persons, such person or persons belong to a particular national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. An intention to destroy such group in whole or part existed, and the conduct was part of a pattern of similar conduct directed against that group. Additionally, prohibited in Article 2 of the Geneva Convention, acts that were perpetrated by Indonesia include serious bodily or mental harm, deliberate infliction on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcible transfers of children. The main disagreement exists in classifying East Timor as a genocide lies in the interpretation of specific aspects of legal definitions. Following the deaths of approximately 200,000 Timorese over a 23-year period, East Timor officially gained its independence in 2002, with trials against Indonesia ending in 2005. Only 10 years ago, the UN withdrew peacekeeping initiatives in East Timor. Today, the 99% Christian population of 1.3 million people reside under a semi-presidential republic and is prospering as one of the world's youngest independent nations. After everything that the Timorese went through and the atrocities that occurred there, it's interesting to note that ultimately Australia, who sided with Indonesia during the genocide, ended up striking a financial deal with the Timorese for harvesting oil, paying up to 3.5 billion pounds sterling over 20 years, beginning in 2004. While the Timorese retain 90% of the royalties, from the proceeds of Australia drilling in their country, Australia will yield 4 to 5 times that amount in refining and selling the oil. Apologize for being behind on that slide. I just want to acknowledge Dr. Fisher and Dr. Mudrik Evan-Ken for giving me this opportunity. I certainly appreciate it and acknowledge my research partner, Jake Guerra. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Shalom.
Okay, our next speaker would be Nikki Harrison Moretto. Nikki, are you on camera, or you wrote that you wouldn't be? Are you here at all?
I am here, but unfortunately,
yeah, you're here.
I've had
Okay,
to
yeah, I know.
travel home, so I do not have.
Yeah, you told me. I saw it, although I was quite busy, but I managed to see your email. Anyway, thank you very much for being with us. So, Nikki Harrison Moretto, please present yourself and your paper.
Hi, my name is Nikki Harrison Moretto. I am a third-year PhD student in public policy at Liberty University. I am a engineer for the U.S. Army, and I'll be providing an overview of my team's research project into the Guatemalan genocide. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. My research teammates for this project were Shannon McBady and Patrick Flanagan. So an overview of what happened in Guatemala is Guatemala's internal conflict lasted from about 1960 to 1996. The violence targeted the Mayan people peaked around 1981 and 1983 under the General Rios Montt. He was a Guatemalan military officer turned dictator after a military coup. After only being in power for about 17 months, he was the most destructive and bloody leader of the Guatemalan conflict. The atrocities included 626 massacres and the death or disappearances of over 200,000 people. Scorched earth operations were carried out that burned buildings and crops, slaughtered livestock, contaminated water sources, and destroyed cultural symbols. Additionally, an estimated 500,000 to 1.5 million people were displaced within Guatemala or sought refuge in other countries. A United Nations commission also determined that more than 100,000 women were raped for the death squads. Over 90% of the stated violence was carried out by the state. Operation Sophia, or the mass slaughter of everyone in villages, including women, children, and the elderly, was said to have been meant to eliminate any potential support from actors against the state. The Mayan people were disproportionately targeted due to their assumed alliance with the guerrilla fighters because they lived in close proximity. However, that correlation was exaggerated. This occurred due to the traditionalist racial motivations and historical desire to destroy Mayan communities. An estimated 70 to 90% of Mayan villages were destroyed, and an estimated 97% of the victims of the Mayan conflict, of the Guatemalan conflict, were Mayan. The internal conflict ended in 1996 when a peace accord was signed. The United Nations organized a commission of historical clarification that released reports declaring that the government had a policy of genocide against the Mayan people. Initially, court cases began as a universal jurisdiction case in Spain. A criminal complaint was filed in the Spanish National Court against Montt and other government leaders. These proceedings assisted with personal jurisdiction cases in a Guatemalan court. The Guatemalan court tried Rios Montt and sentenced him to 80 years in prison for torture, genocide, terrorism, and crimes against humanity. This was the first time a head of state had been tried and convicted of genocide and by its national court. However, his conviction was vacated and he died during his retrial in 2018. Additionally, multiple government leaders and soldiers were also arrested for their involvement in the genocide. Some of these court cases are still ongoing, and some were suspended for the health reasons of the people being prosecuted. But some actors have been held accountable. For example, 4 soldiers were sentenced to 6,060 years in prison each in 2011 for their actions of genocide. I want to thank everyone for your time. I apologize that I had to make it short due to a personal situation, but the sources of my research project are available by request, and I've included my contact information on the last side for anyone who has any questions.
Thank you very much. Our next presenter would be Nikki Harrison Moretto from Liberty University. Sorry. Amy Durant, you're right. From Liberty University. Yes. Hi, Amy. Please present yourself and your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ami Durant, and I am a second-year student at Liberty University. I am currently studying for my PhD in public policy. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be here. I also want to thank Dr. Fisher, Dr. Hilly, and everyone else for the opportunity to present. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I will be presenting on the Darfur genocide in Sudan, and I'll just be providing an overview of the research that my teammates and I found. So just to give you some background information, this was considered the first genocide of the 21st century. It occurred during the midst of Sudan's second civil war that was between 1983 and 2005. The conflict leading to genocide in Darfur began in February 2003 as two anti-government rebel groups, the Sudan Liberation Army and the Justice and Equality Movement, emerged, igniting an anti-rebel offensive. While the Darfur tragedy has often been reduced to perpetuate stereotypes about Africa as a continent, behind the tragic event lies a complex history of deeply entrenched social inequalities, environmental crisis, competition of natural resources, the militarization of rural societies, and above all, a chronic problem of bad governance that has plagued Sudan since its independence. The conflict is really a part of a larger ongoing series of Sudanese crises, with one conflict spilling from one part of the country to another. These conflicts can be attributed to deeply rooted regional, political, and economic inequalities. The principal causes of conflict in Darfur was competition over resources, but the ongoing carnage is a product of a long history of ethnic marginalization by Sudan's ruling elites. Some of the effects of the Darfur genocide include the immediate result of the 2003 attacks were the displacement of more than 1 million people within Darfur itself, and about 188,000 to Chad until August 2004. These displacements were also amplified by the widespread destruction and deterioration of the natural environment and local social systems. Among the refugee camp population, starvation and malnutrition hit women and children particularly hard. Additionally, the refugees and internally displaced people largely blamed militia attacks for indiscriminate killings, rape, abductions, cattle and property looting, and razing of villages. Due to the Sudanese government's restriction on outside humanitarian assistance, deaths attributed to the violence were estimated to be between 4,000 to 10,000 a month. In early 2004, United Nations officials first raised international concerns of genocide as a high-profile media reports emerged with stories of horrific attacks on villages in the western region of Darfur. In September 2004, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell labeled the violence genocide at the UN Genocide Convention, but it was not accompanied by new initiatives or immediately embraced by other governments. Both the US and European governments were not willing to intervene militarily and could not develop a coherent policy toward Sudan. The UN issued a number of threats. They also passed a series of resolutions. However, these were rendered ineffective by the defiance of Sudanese governments and the maneuvering of Arab countries and of China, who happens to be Sudan's main oil trading partner and supplier of arms. Challenges to sustainable peacekeeping in Darfur relate to outside power-specific interests in Sudan's oil and other resources, like I mentioned on the previous slide. Numerous peace agreements have also failed due to government corruption and political divisions among armed rebel groups, which have allowed for the continuation of conflict in Darfur. The current state of crisis in Darfur right now, there continues to be ongoing tension and violence. In December 2020, the UN Security Council voted for a complete withdrawal of all peacekeepers, despite continued intercommunal violence and concerns about the Sudanese government's inability to protect civilians. Violent intercommunal clashes began almost immediately after the withdrawal. Sudan became a member of the UN on November 12, 1956, and is obligated to follow verdicts of the Security Council pursuant to Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. The Security Council determined that Sudan failed to act appropriately in the investigation and prosecution of crimes that occurred in Darfur. Sudan is required to cooperate with the International Criminal Court in the investigation and prosecution of the war crimes occurring in Darfur. Sudan's president during the civil war, Omar al-Bashir, was accused of being the mastermind and directing the Arab Janjaweed militia's political dominance against civilians in Darfur. For this reason, the International Criminal Court found reasonable grounds to charge Bashir with genocide, and arrest warrants have been issued against him. Unfortunately, these warrants have yet to be enforced. The Darfur genocide today. Violence continues to rage in Darfur 2 decades on. Aid agencies continue to struggle to raise funds as the world's attention has once again shifted, and there continues to be increase in food insecurity and displacement. And that is the end of my presentation. And again, I would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add that while the UN report has not been able to prove genocide in terms of the genocidal intent that we have talked about today, the International Criminal Court did find the possibility to, or was trying to prosecute Omar al-Bashir. He is still wanted. He around the world, and he cannot leave Africa, the continent of Africa. So there were disagreements within the UN mechanisms, although the ICC is not specifically a UN mechanism. Okay, so now I will present Bess Blackburn, and from Liberty University. Bess, please present yourself and your research.
Thank you. I just share my screen here. Started. All right, can you see that? Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good evening. My name is Bess Blackburn. I am currently a second-year law student at Liberty University School of Law, and I'd like to thank the Helm School of Government for involving me in this research project when I was in grad school. So thank you, Dr. Fisher. And also, I believe Dr. Sneed is in the room. I was writing my master's thesis with Dr. Sneed at the time of this research. So it's good to see you, Dr. Sneed. So I'm so excited to present. I'm going to go ahead and get started. And my co-researchers on this project were Johnny Moore and Dalton Kane. I'll be speaking today about the Yazidi genocide, and what struck me about the genocide in particular was how proportionality played such a role in this group. You know, there weren't a ton of, the numbers aren't huge compared to a lot of other genocides that the researchers looked at. However, proportionally, given the minority of the group, there's a severe detriment. So I want to start first with Mosul, which is kind of where the genocide takes place, right outside of Mosul, Iraq. You can see this is a map from June 2014, and the Yazidi genocide took place in August of the same year. You can already see where ISIS is starting to move in to several important cities, including Mosul. Why Mosul? Well, there's a few reasons that have significance outside of just the geopolitical nature of it. It's believed to be the ancestral home of Abraham and also the ancient city of Nineveh. And the broader Nineveh Plains is where this genocide unfolds and takes place. There's several minority groups that lived there at the time, still do live there, including the Yazidis and Christians and others. So like I said, here you can see the Nineveh Plains are just right outside of Mosul proper. And while ISIS was invading Mosul, they also ran a parallel campaign to destroy the minorities of the Nineveh Plains specifically. And I wanted to take a second too, I know I'm talking about the Yazidis, but I think it's important to note in terms of when genocide takes place, often it's not just one people group that suffers. And there can be several that suffer at the same time due to being in the same place. So for instance, the Christians in and around Mosul were marked as followers of the Nazarene, and they were given ultimatums to convert. And if they didn't convert, they were given several ways to die or enter servitude. And this is very similar to the treatment of the Yazidis that we get to here. So the Yazidis are a small minority group indigenous to Mesopotamia, and they're united both ethnically and also religiously. They share a lot of the same traditions with other Middle Eastern cultures, but they're set apart by a few things, one being their prayer rituals, a belief in reincarnation, and a central role of the peacock angel, who is worshipped as a messenger to the Yazidi god. And it's because of these unique tenets in their faith that they're specifically targeted by ISIS. And this is why they actually went and settled in the northern region of Iraq in order to protect themselves from the genocide. Like, they were trying to protect themselves, however, it didn't work. So basically what occurred is in August 3rd, 2014 and continuing, started the genocide, and ISIS came in and raided the villages, took the men, generally killed the men, generally forced the women into servitude, but not exclusively. An estimated 3,000 to 5,000 Yazidis, mostly men and elderly women, were killed, while approximately 6,000, mostly the women and children, both male and female, were taken captive. To this day, many Yazidis remain hidden in mass graves, and hundreds of those Yazidi women who were sold into sexual slavery also remain lost. As a result, the atrocities committed against the Yazidi community and their neighbors prompted genocide resolutions around the world by several legislative bodies in the UK, Canada, and the EU. And here, this is some research. As I was going back through the research we had done, I noticed that since I had conducted this research, there was actually a funeral ceremony of sorts for 104 Yazidis who were brought home to the northern plains of Iraq in 2021. And you see here pictured, the BBC reported on it. They have, these are coffins of unmarked bodies. And you see, like, for instance, that picture there in the foreground, they took pictures of those that had been lost and put them on each coffin, symbolizing who it could be, because they don't know exactly where everyone has gone. But I thought it was a beautiful tribute. So that leads me to my next point, which is that the Yazidi genocide is not quite over in terms of its effects. 200,000 are still displaced in northern Iraq. 2,800 women and children are still missing, and 150,000 refugees to Sinjar are struggling to rebuild. So even if those who have returned home are struggling with how to recreate life as it was before August of 2014. And this leads me to my next point as I move into my conclusion regarding the importance of proportionality when looking at this genocide. While this genocide is not unique because of its numbers, it is unique in that this was already a very small population to begin with that was distinct both by its ethnicity and by its religion. And so when ISIS came in and committed these atrocities, it was proportionally devastating to this group of people. As of July 2019, the risk of continued persecution and even genocide remains with the Yazidi group. And although the several legislative bodies from the UK, EU, Canada, and others have submitted on a global scale that this was indeed a genocide, not a single conspirator or perpetrator of this genocide has been brought to justice in any court of law. And I wanted to end on a more positive note. While this may be true, there is some activism taking place in the politics policy space, which I found encouraging. The picture you see here is of a woman named Nadia Murad, and she is a Yazidi activist and recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize. She's speaking here at one of the international ministerials to advance religious freedom in Washington, DC. She wrote a memoir where she writes, "I want to be the last girl in the world with a story like mine." And she started her own initiative, which you can see the top picture is a picture of her website, and the bottom picture is a picture of her YouTube channel, where she has started this organization to help combat specifically women facing these, or not combat women, but combat these situations where women specifically are being targeted in light of the violence, genocide, and how that affects women in terms of sexual slavery. Nadia herself was subjected to such slavery during the Yazidi genocide, and she was able to escape. But I find it, it is tough to talk about these issues, but it is hopeful to see different people who have been affected by this and have allowed that not to crush them, but rather to embolden them to speak the truth and to fight for justice and freedom. And here are my sources. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Bess. Yeah, I wanted to note that your point about proportionality was very important. The fact that you can see that it is not only the numbers. I mean, as you said, the numbers are in terms of proportionality, the numbers here are significant, but in general, the numbers of an occurrence of genocide are not the case. It is not about whether there were mass killings. It's about the intention, and it's about the other activities that comprise genocide. So thank you for that. And I just forgot to mention that, in fact, the order of presentations is not random. It is a chronological order, if you have not noticed. And I wanted to stress that the first presenter should have been Maya Goldstein. She could not be here for personal reasons that we just found for current personal reasons, and this is why she is still included. And she was supposed to present the extermination of the gypsy during World War II, which is usually overlooked because it occurred during the Holocaust, but we wanted to stress that this is still important. So I'm sorry that you could not do that, but you're most welcome to see our discussion of this on our website. So this important topic. So we're continuing with Elizabeth Atinuk Aioli from Liberty University, formerly Liberty University, and now please present yourself.
Thank you very much. I actually do not have a slide, but I would still make a presentation. I am Atinuke Elizabeth Ayowale, former master's student in public policy from Liberty University. And I'm currently a second year student of political science doctoral student of political science at Southern Illinois University. I'd like to especially thank Dr. Fisher and Dr. Healy for this opportunity to make this presentation today. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We have some noises, so maybe you should. Maybe you're moving the microphone. It should be static or something. Try to see. Okay.
Okay. Is it
Now it's better.
now?
It's better.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So my presentation today will be focusing on the people of the Myanmar genocide, specifically the people of Rohingya. The people of Rohingya regarded as, according to literature, as the most persecuted people in the world currently. And it is declared that the Myanmar's military conducted the genocide against the people of Rohingya. And this is very interesting because it was the genocide occurred at a time when Myanmar was currently democratizing, that is transitioning from an authoritarian regime to democratic regime. And so just for context, the people of Rohingya, they comprise of a minority Sunni Muslim ethnic group that currently reside in the north of Rakhine state. They are Buddhist and speak a native dialect of the Burmese language that represent a cultural and historical affiliation between both ethnic groups. The source of the term Rohingya is vaguely known at the moment, but there are contemporary political debate and argument on the origins of the Rohingya. At present, the Rohingyas have experienced about 25,000 deaths from the genocide, and there have been other forms of gang rapes and sexual violence against 18,000 Rohingyan girls and women, and an estimated 116,000 people, Rohingyan people, population have been beaten with, and 36,000 thrown into fire. Currently, over 1 million of them are internally displaced from their countries. Now, this introduces the crux of my presentation today, which is the relationship between democratization and mass violence, or specifically atrocity. Because what we would typically find is that atrocities would introduce democratization. That's just it's the
Sorry, again, there are many noises. We can't hear you. I don't know what's happening. Right?
Okay.
Try again.
Okay. But did you? I hope my point were made clear. Otherwise, I'm happy to come again, or I could just continue. So this presentation is especially relevant for two reasons. Especially relevant to Myanmar for two reasons. One, because of it exposes the or it tells us about the unpredictable outcome that usually arises from democratization, and secondly, because of the counterinsurgency explanations that sometimes explain, albeit not sufficiently explain, give explanations for certain atrocities such as genocide in Myanmar, in a country like Myanmar. So on democratization, the Myanmar Constitution of 2008 allowed for the continuation of military presence in government. And when Myanmar agreed to transition to civilian rule in 2010, it replaced the older top military leadership with younger military leadership, and also replaced the leadership and the executive and legislature with younger military leadership. This replacement of new leadership, particularly in the military, meant that younger officers were promoted ahead of the older officers, institutionalizing a new problem of military rivalry, which consequently led to some findings on the role of extremist elite ideology on democratization. after the constitution brought about the military-backed civilian government that led to the swearing in of Myanmar's civilian president, President Thein Sein. The transition allowed for the expression of some democratic values like peaceful protest, free and fair parliamentary elections, and it also provided for expression of Buddhist and Burma nationalism, which is very critical to the minority ethnic group of Rohingya. And however, the continuation of Myanmar's military position continues to restrict the expression of the Rohingya minority group, despite this little progress that seems to have been made. I have my presentation in paper form, that's why.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, no.
Could you repeat what the last? Yeah, I think she said. Yeah, that's what I said. Oh, yeah. I thought I heard that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, and our last but not least presenter is Yotam Likovsky. If you want to move your slide, no, so you could come here. Yeah, okay. As you can see in the booklet, Yotam will be talking about a genocide that is still going on, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both Dr. Mulek Evan-Chen specifically and the Genocide Research Center's staff more generally, both for the opportunity to participate in this project as well as for the opportunity to present it. I'll talk a bit about the facts regarding China's policy in Xinjiang, the far west of the country, and then about the legal implications of these facts. And if we have time, briefly about the sorts of real world avenues of redress. Yeah, right. Sure. My name is Yotam. I'm finishing my LLB at Tel Aviv University and beginning in LLM now. Okay, so I'll begin by talking a bit about the facts and then proceed to review the legal implications and finally talk about the sort of real world avenues of redress with which these legal facts can be transformed into a real impact. China's involvement in the far west of the country, specifically in Xinjiang, is long-standing. It's begun a long time before communist China's founding, but the policy has been transformed markedly within the last 2 decades, and specifically since 2017. China's goal since 2017 has been most importantly, to dismantle Uyghur cultural and religious institutions and to transform this minority group, China's largest Muslim minority group, which numbers more than 2 million members, into a sort of the type of Chinese citizen that the Communist Party prefers, which is similar to Han Chinese in cultural practices and certainly not a very religious group. This policy since 2017 has included 2 main avenues, 2 main components. The first is the creation of a massive network of prisons. They are called re-education centers, but in practice, the fact is that people are sent there for committing offenses. For example, some are sent because they grow a beard, which is considered a sign of Islamic piety. Others are sent for contacting relatives outside China or similar infractions against the Chinese social order. These prisons have detained at one time more than 1 million Uyghurs, which is a very large proportion of the population, including both men and women. The second pillar is the creation of a concurrent surveillance network, probably the most comprehensive and certainly the most intrusive in the world currently. This network includes hundreds, if not thousands, of checkpoints in Uyghur townships, routine surveillance of phones, confiscation of phones, and even a program in which Chinese agents are embedded within homes of Uyghur families in order to monitor from the inside, so to speak, compliance with Chinese rules and with prohibitions against displays of Islamic faith. From the perspective of genocide research, the main component which is interesting in this policy is the targeting of the Uyghurs' birth rate. It was much higher until recently than the majority birth rate and the Han Chinese birth rate. But this is rapidly changing as China has sought to create as comprehensive as possible a policy of anti-natalism. First of all, China, as part of this policy, has coerced and even forced physically women into undergoing sterilization procedures or use of birth control, especially IUDs. Here's a graph showing the transformation of the rate of sterilization procedures per capita in China generally and in Xinjiang province specifically. You can see that the number of sterilization procedures in Xinjiang shoots up around 2017, and this is obviously a result of some cultural change, but a change in policy which was executed and pursued very, very aggressively, including within the camps by forcing female detainees to consent, so to speak. Of course, that's not a consent freely obtained, to undergo these procedures. In addition to actual sterilization procedures, China is also engaged in massive segregation effort, putting people in re-education camps, which are segregated according to gender, especially young people, young men and women, creates a large problem from this regard as well, and interference in private life, as I mentioned previously, the program of putting Chinese agents within Uyghur homes. I think I'll skip that. The legal standard in this area is the Article 2D of the Genocide Convention, which prohibits I think I missed a slide. Yeah, this one, which prohibits imposing measures intended to prevent births within a group. I should say that unlike other parts of the Genocide Convention, this clause is relatively under-theorized because fortunately, China's policy is the first effort on this scale since the convention's ratification to prevent births in such a systematic and such a comprehensive fashion, and especially the first first policy in which this anti-natalist component is the main part of the genocidal acts committed. I should note that China has not, unlike previous genocides presented here, has not engaged in a massive or systematic effort at any rate of killing Uyghurs or making their conditions of life unsustainable, as Article 2C prohibits as well. Now, if we, because of the fact there are not many judicial decisions or Security Council resolutions dealing with this clause, with this type of genocide, we have to go back to the Genocide Conventions, the debates surrounding its ratification in order to find out the meaning of this clause. The delegation which originally presented it, I think it was in fact in the Secretariat draft, talked about mentioned three sorts of acts which are prohibited by, which are supposed to be prohibited under this clause. These acts are sterilization or forced abortion, the segregation of the sexes, and obstacles to marriage. China has engaged in all three types of policies. First of all, as I mentioned, there's a massive effort to force women to undergo sterilization procedures, and a segregation effort that is created mainly by the use of these re-education camps, which are segregated by sex. Now, the obstacles to marriage is a part that is more difficult and was in fact interpreted in a major judicial decision, and I'll talk a bit about that. The ICTR's Akayesu case dealt, among other things, with allegations of genocide by genocidal acts done by through this method of preventing births within a group. In that case, in Akayesu's case, the acts alleged were a systematic policy encouraged by Akayesu of the rape of Tutsi women by Hutu militias. The problem the ICTR faced was that this was not a direct physical or even legal prohibition on marriage. Of course, later these victims could marry. However, the ICTR stated that this was a type of genocidal policy because even if there's not a physical or legal obstacle to marriage, the rape was committed with the direct intention to prevent the victims from actually continuing to fulfill the customary norms of the community, which in the Tutsi case prohibited women from marrying after suffering rape. These sort of customary or cultural prohibitions of obstacles, creations of obstacles to marriage, is also the type of obstacle that is presented by Chinese policy. China does not prohibit Uyghur marriages. People can go and engage in a civil, sign a warrant and get a civil marriage certificate within the Chinese state's legal framework. However, they cannot have a religious marriage ceremony according to their Islamic faith, which is the majority faith of almost all the Uyghurs. And this presents a problem because even if you can marry and you do receive the rights of a married couple under Chinese law, you cannot bring up your children in the way that the community's norms encourage you or require you to, which is within the Islamic faith and according to Islamic marriage practices. this is, and of course, it's very large and it's a very major problem because China has a comprehensively prohibited marriage ceremonies within its territory, within Xinjiang, something that affects the entire generation of young Uyghurs, which is currently unable to marry according to their traditions. Okay, so I'll just conclude briefly by saying that after saying everything, all this, one has to be, I think, very wildly optimistic to expect the international community to be able to protect or to redress the grievances of the Uyghur community, considering how central China's position is to the economic and to the legal civil order. But in any case, if that goal is to be reached at some point, the first step towards this will be the identification and the explication of the legal issues regarding this issue. And in this regard, more and more scholars and states and institutions are coming around to the conclusion that China's policies in Xinjiang is a type of genocide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all of your presentation. Thank you, Tom, for your last presentation. And also this is related to what we have spoken about today. We have spoken about the cultural genocide of the Uyghurs, and now you can see that it is also accompanied by a physical genocide, as Yotam explained. Okay, so before we begin the session of questions and answers, and I would like the students to be involved in this session more than the audience, but maybe later the audience too. I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ariel, who you all know, and I'm telling the students that have not participated in the conference until today, that Ariel was one of the organizers of this conference, and also, of course, a research fellow in the center. So please.
So thank you. Thank you. So for me, this was the best session of the whole conference, and not only the best session, but also the most important one. And you said earlier that you made the structure of a chronological order. It's a chronological order, but it was also a jigsaw puzzle. It was also a mosaic of different places in the world. And first of all, for me, it was, we usually go into class in order to teach. And here I found myself studying and really getting, for me, it's new knowledge. And it's not only new knowledge, but I was also fascinated with some of the students that we met. Because, for example, when Shlomi Friedman spoke about the Ash community in Uruguay, which I never heard before, I was asking myself, what more motivates a young lawyer to study this small community? It's not obvious at all. And then we met Robert Swinskowski, who spoke about East Timor with many details that I wasn't aware of. And I wanted to comment that starting a PhD after retirement is a formula for success. It's not obvious at all. And then we had Nikki Harrison Moreto about the Maya with so many details, who's an engineer in the army, but does research. And according to the picture, because we saw only a picture, she's now 16. So who knows what's going to happen next. And then there was this detailed review of Ami Durant, who does a PhD in public policy about Darfur. We all know about Darfur because we read in the newspapers, but we don't know anything about Darfur. And this is what I realized when I heard her talk. And then we had Bess Blackburn about the Yazidi. Again, a law student who already completed her master's thesis. What on earth is she doing research for? And she talked about the Yazidi, and it sounds absurd, but she brought the story into life, really. And it's an oxymoron, but that's what happened here. And then we had Elizabeth Ayol, and there were so many background noises. But the knowledge of details about Myanmar, for me, it was very, very impressive. And then we ended with Yotam Lichovsky, who again, if you finish your LLB in Tel Aviv University, what on earth are you doing here? Where is he? In Thursday evening. I thought that Thursday evening was for young people to go to parties, not to speak about another Chinese massacre. So for me, this was really the most important part of the whole conference. Thanks.
Thank you so much for these words. I have to say that I shared when I worked with these unimaginable young students, I shared the same impression and surprise. Why on earth are you willing to work for this project? You are so busy and you have so much on your plate. And
I think they deserve an applause, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what you said. So please, I would like to leave the floor for the students to ask questions. And so how would you can raise your hand, like, you know, through Zoom or even physically. And
wow, actually, I don't have a question, but I have an answer. You asked me what going in young lawyer mind when it comes to this interesting topic. So first of all, I'm a third generation of a Holocaust survivor, and the genocide is something that I was born with, I was raised in, and I'm live with. My grandma had a number from the Auschwitz camp, and it was a subject that always was in my mind. And so when Haley come with this opportunity to research and to see how much cruel and how much miserable can be in this world, and on the other hand, how much the world can say nothing and know about things and just closing eyes, it's unbelievable. So this is my mainly answer to what I find so attractive about this topic and about the genocide. And I want to thank again to Dr. Eli Mudrik Even-Chen for this opportunity.
thank you. Thank you. Please go ahead. If no.
I guess
Yeah.
I just like to kind of pair it off that and answer that question as well. So as a criminal justice student and practitioner dealing with, you know, crime for over 30 years, you know, taking one person's life, in my head, there was nothing more heinous. And then discovering these atrocities that I never knew about, and no greater crime than actually trying to exterminate an entire culture of people. I began to feel obligated as my research partner and I went on looking into this. And when all of you gave me the opportunity to do this, you know, there wasn't any question. When I think about humanity, I think about it being humane, and you see a very, very dark side of our world that, to reiterate, is unbelievable how it goes unnoticed, and how there's actually questions in the legal context of what people's intent is in based on their actions. And you know, I find that very difficult to actually deal with from a humane perspective.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that, of course, the Research Center database has, of course, an entry on the Holocaust. You could wonder why it was not presented here. I thought we discussed the Holocaust, that we gave the Holocaust main center during our discussions, and I thought that in this panel maybe we should look around, and of course we also looked at other cases during the conference, but I thought specifically at this conference, at this panel, even the concluding panel, maybe we should take a look at the world in general, and I hope you agree with me on that. Okay. Any more questions? You can have questions from the audience as well, if you want. Yes.
Hello. Well, first of all, let me again commend to all of the presenters for the very well prepared and efficient delivery of their presentations.
Yes.
Very factual, very on point. And I can only wish that on the future events, the student section will be included into the main event, and that the students will get their like own panel. And
this was a problem of the hours,
yeah,
because it is morning to them now. So.
But the question is regarding China, regarding Xinjiang. Please, do you have any information how has the China zero COVID policy influenced this particular province? How has this policy perhaps intervened with the ongoing cultural genocide in Xinjiang? I have heard some reports that some of the anti-pandemic measures may be actually used for these genocidal purposes in Xinjiang as well. Do you have any particular information on or evidence on that?
Mr. Biden left.
Yes, yes, he left.
He left with all the information. He took all the data with him.
Okay. Okay. Yes, and
without flipping your papers, the presentation, can you tell us a little bit, I think you have prepared this, the democratization process you talked about. I was waiting to hear it, but I'm not sure if it was there. Great paper, by the way, and everybody else. I just want to commend you all. You all did so well researched, so prepared, and so ready within time. None of us kept our times here. So you were so disciplined with it, and right on time, well prepared, right? Very, so good. I mean, I'm impressed with your work. Very well done. And of course, I was trying to save time here, pointing to Elizabeth again on the democratization process, because how does genocide relate to democratization? What were you trying to pull out here? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Udubong. It is so nice to see you again, although virtually, and thank you for your question. So with respect to my paper, I think I currently study democratization as one of my subfields in my doctoral program. And it was very fascinating to me when I found out that the timeline of events for the Myanmar genocide happened at a time where there was rapid democratic reforms in Myanmar. So that relationship was what inspired, and I had also previously worked on a brief summary with my colleagues at Liberty on the Myanmar genocide, but it was just interesting to find out that relationship. What is that relationship between democratization and genocide and such mass violence that the country executed on a particular minority group, which were the Rohingya group, and that led me to discovering several explanatory factors that could have possibly impacted this. So the personal motivation behind this for me is, as a young person, the future of democracy. I think this has very serious implications for democracy. Democracy is a system of government that most countries, especially countries that have had a long-standing history of authoritarian regime, are currently moving towards right now, and the aim of that is to achieve a more consolidated society, more solidarity, more respect for human rights, more emphasis on the respect for human rights, and of course more peaceful society. But yet still having such still trying to navigate that relationship as a young person, because I also studied public policy. So that is the fact, that was all the puzzles that I was trying to fix up in my head about what is the way forward behind first of all, that there was actually a relationship between genocide and democratization, and what is the way forward with that kind of relationship? What are the possible causal factors that correlate with that relationship, and what can we as young researchers also do for the future of democracy in our world? Thank you very much once again. And thank you to my co-presenters.
We heard you. Thank you.
Thank
you very
thank
much.
you.
Well explained. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So I would like to join the all the praises that you received right now. I have given you my comments during the common work that we did. I was very impressed of your abilities to make those researches. I would like to mention that Professor Yuri Mantilla and also Professor Caleb Fisher have worked with you on these entries, and now your presentations were just excellent. And as Dr. Udobong said, you kept on time and you were very professional, and I hope this gives you an incentive to continue working with us and in academia. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day, because for you it's still morning or early noon, and we are here in late evening. So bye-bye. Thank you so much. See you soon.